Take two of this particular project. Good morning, YouTube. Hope everybody's doing well out there. This is actually take two. I've been drinking pretty heavily this morning. This episode is sponsored by White Claw. Just kidding, not sponsored at all, but I am drinking White Claw as I do the commentary for this particular video. So this particular build, we are doing another tinsel project, and if you saw the Christmas special from December of 2020, you saw that I made a tinsel bowl using pretty much the same material. But in this one, I had this leftover colorful tinsel, absolutely loved this material, and really wanted to learn from my previous mistakes and build something a little bit better. So you guys will be watching this in the summer. This was actually built on January 1st of 2021, New Year's project, but I had this left over and I really wanted to redeem myself from my previous project, and I think in this particular project we really do get a lot better end result with this particular one. So all we did was take this colored tinsel, cut it up, put it in the mold, use the waste block, and now we're pouring in our epoxy. And if you had seen from my Christmas one, I added way too much particular tinsel in that particular project and had a lot of darkness to the particular project. But in this one, I really wanted to use this clear East Coast resin, crystal clear epoxy, and really get the colors to shine through. Because I think what could have happened with the particular Christmas project, it could have turned out a lot better had I just not used as much tinsel. And I think I learned from my mistake from that previous video, and I think this one's going to turn out a lot better. As you can see here, we're just pouring in that epoxy. You can see the color right through that epoxy, and we don't have a lot of that darkness that we had in that first particular build. So here we are, just making sure that the epoxy gets into all those cool cracks and corners. And here we are, 4.5 hours outside of the pressure pot. Looking really good. I was really happy the way that this particular resin casted. Like I said before, we're using East Coast resin for this particular build, and it turned out really well. Not any bubbles or anything in it, and here we are outside of the actual mold itself. Crystal clear. Absolutely love. Can't say enough good things about East Coast resin. So if you're on a budget and you're a woodworker, East Coast resin definitely is worth an investment. It's relatively cheap is not the right word. It's one of the more least expensive resins, but it works absolutely just as well as any of the top tier resins that you might be seeing out there. So once we got it out of the mold itself, here we are just using the hot glue gun to get as much of that material on there, using that waste block so we can plant the faceplate on there. And we did this project, like I said, January 1st of 2021. This is the first project of 2021, and it was about 30 degrees or so inside of the actual garage, so my hands are freezing up into this point, and I wanted to make sure that I put plenty of hot glue on there so it didn't actually fly off the lathe. So I went back, as you'll see here, right now you can see all the edges. I took that hot glue gun and just added a copious amount of glue, because what you don't want is a big chunk of resin to fly off the lathe and hit you in the face. So here we are. Now we're just getting out our material, working the edges, and there is definitely something to be said about the temperature of the resin. So I had this resin mold for about a week inside of my house where I keep it around 72 degrees, but as you'll see here in a little bit later in the project, the ambient temperature of the resin does have an effect when you're working the material off the lathe. So here we are. I initially was using the bowl gouge just to get that top layer off, but once the top layer was done, felt comfortable coming back with that round carbide tool. And I've learned that you really just have to take off that superficial portion of the actual material, and then once you do that, you can pretty much come back and hit it with a round carbide tool, and it does pretty well without any real difficulty. So once we got that top layer off, now we're just getting that nice round shape that we typically will go for with these particular projects. And I really didn't have a lot of issues like I did with the Christmas project. If you go back and watch that video, I did have a little bit of chipping, but I really did learn a lot from that particular project, not getting too deep with the actual resin using the bowl gouge and just doing a majority of the work using the round carbide tool, taking that lip of the bottom of the bowl off, and then coming back and making that mortise like we'll do here in just a bit. So really happy with that particular round carbide tool, and just getting that nice ribbons off of it, as you can see there from the video so far. So once we did that, we went back and just made that mortise, and that's what we're doing here. So there's still a lot of superficial resin once I start gouging out the bottom of the mortise, but I knew that a majority of the work had been done, so I didn't need to do too much with the bowl gouge. So then I just took the square carbide tool and just started to round out the bottom of it, not too deep or not too wide with the actual mortise itself, just enough to get to the chuck in there. And then all I had to do was come back, hit it with a round carbide tool, and a majority of the work was done, which makes my job a lot easier once we get it all finished. So once I was happy with the mortise, then I just came back, and there was a lot of super glue like I had alluded to before in the beginning of the video. Just came back and hit it with a chisel, and I should have put something soft behind the actual blank itself, but here we are just popping off that wood blank. If you've seen some of my earlier videos, you'll notice that I go back with the chisels and take off the waste block, but I find that if I just go ahead and just remove it with the chisel, it just makes it a lot easier on the blank itself. So once we had it reversed in the chuck, again, sorry for the shoddy camera work in this particular project. I didn't notice this until film editing, but I didn't want to totally remove this portion of the video at all. So what I'm doing here is basically just getting everything nice and even. You can see there that I laid the actual chisel on top of the bowl just to make sure that everything was roughed out the way that I wanted to. So what I also learned from the Christmas project was I usually will take the bowl gouge once I have everything nice and even, and I usually don't attack the actual surface of the bowl itself until I use the bowl gouge. But I noticed that I will have a lot better expectation of gouging if I just even everything out with the round carbide tool as close as possible and still use that tailstock. So once I got a lot of that superficial material off, I came back and now started the gouging process with the round gouging tool, chisel. And I did have a little bit of issue with the gouging portion of this. It didn't cut through as easy as I initially thought it would. And when I actually set up the waste block pine boards that are used for the center of this bowl were a little damp. And it had been snowing a little bit here in West Texas when I had initially set that up. And I did have a little bit of issue gouging. There was a lot of moisture in the wood, which, is not good if you're wood turning, because it makes it a lot more difficult to get in there with a bowl gouge and get that material off as easy as it usually is. When the wood's really dry, and if you've been gouging or bowl turning for any amount of time, you notice that there's a significant difference from when you gouge dry versus wet wood, obviously. I came back, and you won't see this particular part, but I did stop and pause the project for a little bit. Came back and actually sharpened the chisel. It wasn't that the chisel wasn't sharp initially, but when I came back after I sharpened it, I had a little bit easier time gouging a lot of this material off. But I think it was just that wet pine board that I had a lot of difficulty with, and there's a little bit of moisture in the air, and that will affect your wood turning if you're new to woodworking. Obviously, moisture has a lot of effect on your particular projects that you'll do. So here we are a little bit later in the project. I got a lot of the material worked out, and now we're just basically working the lip of the bowl. Again, sorry for some of the resin being in the camera lens. Totally apologize for that. But this is probably one of the better bowls that I've ever created. I learned from my previous mistakes with the Christmas bowl. Not that the Christmas bowl was bad, but this one actually turned out a lot better than I initially thought. And here we are just getting a lot of these good clean shavings off. And like I said, it's about 30 degrees in my garage, and it's absolutely freezing to me. If you're from the state of Texas or you grow up in a warm environment, if it drops below 80 degrees for me, I'm absolutely freezing and can't stand it. So my hands are basically just super cold by this time, and I'm just like, oh my god, as much fun as it is to create these things, if it's cold, it just takes something away from it, because you're just kind of miserable as you're making this. But again, it's a labor of love for me. I absolutely love making these projects, even though it's cold in my garage. But hey, maybe one day I'll get an actual like real woodworking shop, and I can actually, afford to control the temperature. But here we are, just getting a lot of this material worked down. Trying to go as deep as I possibly can with the bowl itself before I hit the bottom of the mortise, which I don't want to do. And then we're just working the edge, switching between the actual bowl gouge itself and the round carbide tool. And then here I come again, working the lip with the square carbide tool, trying to work as much of that material off from the edge, trying to gauge how far close I want to do or how thick I want the lip of that bowl to actually be. But having a lot of success overall with this, and by this time we're pretty much toward the end of the actual project itself. Doing really good work on the bottom of the bowl. Sorry, had to take a sip of the White Claw there. Just kidding. Actually, no, I am drinking while I'm doing this commentary, but that's okay. That's part of the fun. So here we are, hitting it with the 340 grit, and then we're going to go all the way up to the micro mesh like we usually will do. And I'm really happy the way the top of this bowl looks. I think that top layer, where I had a little bit of the wood grain left on the top of the lip of the bowl, and then coming back and hitting it with a micro mesh, wet sanding, it looks absolutely stunning. And I think the way the colors really pop in this particular project really added something to it. So I really hope you guys like this project. Here we are, just hitting it with that wood wax that we typically will use. Sorry if you can hear the cat in the background. She is basically on top of my desk right now, but nobody makes it to the end of these videos, so I'm okay with that. But anyway, hitting with the wood wax, just getting everything nice and smooth out. You can see just absolute perfection on this bowl. I really got to say, I do a lot of projects, and I think every project that I do, 9 times out of 10, I always say, like, this is the best project I've ever done. But this one just, to me, just looks fantastic. I really love the way the colors pop in the resin. We had a little bit of problems with it initially, but wow, it just looks really good. And the sun wasn't shining too bright today. Like I said, I did this on January 1st of 2021, first project of the new year. But man, I was really happy the way this turned out. I really wish the sun was out. You can get a better look of the bowl's overall structure if you could actually see it. But hope you guys got something out of the project. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope everybody's having a good new year, even though it's well into summer. And I'll see you guys in the next project. Okay, so project is done, and it turned out absolutely gorgeous. I don't want to say perfected, but I have basically figured out how to do tinsel in resin, because this looks so much better than my previous attempts. And I can't say how freaking happy I am about this particular project. Absolutely loved it. Had a little bit of issues with the resin once I started to gouge out some certain portions of it. I think it's because it's so cold. Today is actually January 1st of 2021, and we're going into the New Year's with a banger. This is the first project of 2021, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. Really happy the way this turned out. And you guys won't watch this until maybe May or June, but man, really happy. But the temperature is definitely having an effect on the resin when I'm turning it, so I'm noticing that. But it's 30-ish degrees, and for Texans, that's freezing. So hope you guys like the project. Hope you got something out of it. Hope everybody's having a great summer. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next project. All right, peace.